So, have you ever wondered why some businesses succeed even when the odds are stacked against them, while others collapse despite having money and resources? Back in school, I used to think financial decisions were just about math and numbers, but then I realized it's actually the environment around a business that shapes those decisions more than anything else. In today's video, we're diving into exactly how the business environment, things like competition, government policies, and even consumer behavior, directly impacts financial decisions. By the end, you'll understand not just what this means for Class 12 exams, but also how real companies survive and grow in changing conditions. The problem that most students and even many aspiring entrepreneurs face is believing that the success of a business is entirely dependent on the resources it has at hand. Whether that's money, infrastructure, or talent. This mindset leads to a very narrow perspective where financial decisions are thought to be made purely by calculating costs, revenues, and profits. The issue with this belief is that it overlooks the powerful influence of the environment in which a business operates. A company can have the best resources available, but if the surrounding environment is not favorable, like tough government policies, economic slowdown, or aggressive competition, it can still fail. In fact, history has countless examples of businesses that looked perfect on paper, but collapsed because they ignored how external factors shaped their financial decisions. The problem, therefore, is not the lack of resources, but the lack of awareness about the impact of the environment. The solution lies in broadening the perspective of financial decision-making. Instead of only focusing inward, managers and decision makers need to look outward and carefully analyze their environment before finalizing strategies. This means understanding economic conditions, studying competitors, watching consumer behavior, and staying updated with policies and regulations. By doing this, businesses can align their financial decisions with reality rather than assumptions. For instance, a business may want to expand aggressively by investing large amounts of capital, but if the market is experiencing reduced demand due to an economic recession, such a decision could prove disastrous. Similarly, if consumer behavior is shifting toward eco-friendly products, then continuing to invest heavily in traditional alternatives could not only waste money but also lose customers. The solution is to make financial decisions flexible and responsive to external signals, ensuring that resources are not just used effectively but also adapted to changing environments. A real-world example of this can be seen in the story of Nokia, once a global leader in the mobile phone industry. Nokia had ample financial resources, a strong workforce, and global brand recognition. By all measures of internal strength, it should have continued dominating the market. However, Nokia underestimated the changing environment, specifically the shift in consumer preferences towards smartphones with touchscreens and app-based ecosystems. While Apple and Samsung adapted to this change quickly, Nokia stuck with its old models and designs, believing its resources and market presence would sustain it. The result was a dramatic decline in sales, loss of market share, and eventually being acquired by Microsoft. This example shows that no matter how strong resources may be, ignoring the external environment can lead to poor financial decisions and eventual failure. On the other hand, companies that paid attention to their business environment thrived. Take Apple, for example. The company understood the changing consumer demand for more user-friendly and technologically advanced products. By aligning its financial decisions with these market signals, Apple invested heavily in innovation, app ecosystems, and sleek designs. The outcome was not only massive success, but also a loyal customer base that continues to generate revenue year after year. In the context of Class 12 business studies, this concept is extremely important because it teaches students that financial management isn't just about theory or numbers, but about practical decision-making. A business that fails to consider its environment is like a ship sailing without checking the weather. It may move forward temporarily, but the chances of sinking are high. By recognizing the environment as a key driver, businesses can make decisions that are not only profitable but sustainable in the long run. Whether it's setting budgets, deciding on investments, or planning expansions, every financial choice needs to reflect the realities of the environment around it. The problem many students and future business managers encounter is the assumption that financial decisions can be made purely by looking at internal calculations such as profit margins, budgets, or cash flow. While these factors are undeniably important, they only tell part of the story. The real issue is that financial decisions are heavily influenced by external factors, things that exist outside the direct control of the business. For example, a company might decide to increase prices because their costs are rising, but if the market is highly competitive or consumer demand is shrinking, that decision could backfire and lead to massive losses. Many businesses fail because they ignore this reality and assume numbers on a balance sheet are enough to predict success. The problem is that numbers do not exist in isolation. They are shaped by the environment in which the business operates, and ignoring that connection can cause serious financial missteps. The solution to this problem is for businesses to integrate environmental analysis into every major financial decision. This means that before deciding on matters like pricing, investment, or cost-cutting, managers must consider how external conditions will affect outcomes. For instance, if inflation is rising, businesses must evaluate whether increasing prices will still allow them to remain competitive or whether customers will switch to cheaper alternatives. If interest rates are high, borrowing money for expansion might not be wise, even if the financial statements suggest there is capacity to grow. By systematically studying these factors, businesses can adjust their strategies in ways that make financial sense within the current environment. This approach ensures that resources are used wisely and reduces the risk of unexpected losses. Essentially, the solution is to link internal financial data with external environmental forces so that decisions are not only logical on paper, but also realistic in practice. A strong example of this can be seen during the global financial crisis of 2008. Many real estate companies in the United States continued making financial decisions based solely on the numbers from previous years. On paper, property values were high, sales were growing, and credit was easily available. These internal numbers encouraged businesses to keep investing heavily in real estate projects, expecting the boom to continue. However, the external environment was shifting dramatically. Housing demand was weakening, banks were over-leveraged, and the economy was slowing down. Businesses that ignored these signals and made decisions based purely on past data faced bankruptcy when the bubble burst. On the other hand, companies and investors who closely studied the environment and anticipated the downturn adjusted their financial strategies. Some pulled back from risky investments, while others shifted toward safer assets. These decisions allowed them not only to survive the crisis, but also to emerge stronger afterward. Another modern example is Tesla. While traditional automakers continued to base their financial decisions on decades of successful gasoline-powered car sales, Tesla recognized the external shift in consumer behavior towards sustainability and the growing government regulations favoring clean energy. Instead of pouring resources into improving old models, Tesla made financial decisions that prioritized innovation in electric vehicles, battery technology, and charging infrastructure. This was a risky move internally, as it required significant upfront investment and years of potential losses, but it aligned perfectly with the changing external environment. Today, Tesla is one of the most valuable car companies in the world, while many traditional automakers are struggling to catch up. This shows that financial decisions, when made with awareness of the environment, can create long-term competitive advantages. For students in Class 12, this lesson is vital because it demonstrates that financial management is not a closed system of accounting and math, but an open system influenced by the external world. A decision that looks perfect inside a balance sheet may fail when exposed to the realities of consumer behavior, government regulations, or global market conditions. Therefore, linking external environmental analysis with internal financial decisions is not just a business strategy. It is a necessity for survival and growth in the modern world. The problem many businesses face is underestimating the power of competition in shaping financial decisions. A company may believe that, as long as it has a good product and efficient cost management, success is guaranteed. But in reality, competition often dictates how much a business can charge, how much it must spend on marketing, and where it should allocate its resources. If a business ignores competitors, it risks setting unrealistic prices, losing market share, or investing in areas that provide little return. For example, a company might decide to launch a product at a high price because its internal costs justify it, but if a competitor offers a similar product at a lower rate, customers may switch, leaving the company with unsold stock and financial losses. The problem arises because financial decisions are not made in a vacuum. They are constantly influenced by the moves of existing and potential competitors. The solution lies in adopting a competitor-focused approach to financial management. Businesses must monitor not only their own costs and revenues, but also the strategies of others in the same industry. This includes studying competitor pricing, product innovation, promotional campaigns, and even supply chain strategies. By keeping track of competition, businesses can make financial decisions that are realistic and responsive. For example, if a competitor introduces aggressive discounts, a business may need to adjust its pricing structure or add more value to its product to remain competitive. Similarly, if a rival invests heavily in research and development, a business may have to allocate funds toward innovation to avoid being left behind. This does not mean blindly copying competitors, but rather analyzing their strategies to make better, informed financial decisions that balance profitability with market position. Ultimately, the solution is to link financial choices with competitive intelligence so that businesses remain sustainable and relevant in the long run. An example that illustrates this well is the rivalry between Coca-Cola and Pepsi. Both companies operate in the same industry, offering nearly identical products, and yet their financial decisions are heavily shaped by competition with one another. If Coca-Cola decides to increase its marketing budget, Pepsi often responds by doing the same to maintain visibility. If Pepsi launches a new flavor, Coca-Cola might release its own variation to compete. This constant back and forth shows that neither company can make financial decisions in isolation. Every move is influenced by the other's actions. Without considering competition, either company could lose its market share very quickly. In fact, their decades-long rivalry has led to billions being spent on advertising and brand building, all in response to competitive pressures. These financial decisions are not just about internal profit margins, but about maintaining dominance in a highly competitive environment. A modern example can be found in the smartphone industry, particularly between Apple and Samsung. Apple has a strong customer base and premium pricing strategy, but every financial decision it makes is influenced by competition from Samsung and other brands. When Samsung introduces phones with advanced features like foldable screens or improved cameras, Apple is pushed to invest in research, development, and marketing to keep up. Similarly, Apple's decision to maintain premium pricing is supported by its brand value, but it also carefully considers competitor offerings to ensure customers still perceive value in paying more. Samsung, on the other hand, has to decide whether to invest in high-end models to compete directly with Apple or to focus resources on mid-range phones where it has a broader market. These financial decisions are dictated not just by internal goals, but by competitive dynamics in the global marketplace. For students studying Class 12 business studies, this principle is crucial because it highlights that competition is not just about who sells more products, but about who makes smarter financial decisions in response to others. A company cannot simply set prices, budgets, or investment strategies without considering what its competitors are doing. Financial management, therefore, becomes a dynamic process that constantly adapts to the competitive landscape. Understanding this helps students see that businesses thrive not only by managing their own resources, but by anticipating and responding effectively to the actions of others in the industry. The problem businesses often face is the unpredictable influence of government policies and regulations on their financial decisions. Many organizations operate under the assumption that once they set a budget, plan their investments, or calculate their profits, the path forward is stable. However, this is rarely the case because governments frequently introduce new laws, tax structures, and regulations that can dramatically alter financial outcomes. For instance, a company might plan to expand production by investing heavily in new machinery. But if the government suddenly raises import duties on equipment, the costs could skyrocket, making the plan far less profitable. Similarly, changes in corporate tax rates, labor laws, or environmental regulations can either increase expenses or limit the feasibility of certain operations. The problem is that these external forces are beyond the direct control of businesses, and failing to anticipate them can result in severe financial setbacks. The solution lies in proactive financial planning that incorporates regulatory awareness. Businesses must stay updated on government policies and anticipate possible changes that could affect their financial strategies. This means allocating resources not only based on internal efficiency, but also with an eye on the legal and regulatory environment. For example, if the government is signaling stricter environmental laws, a company can begin adjusting its financial decisions early by investing in eco-friendly technologies. This may involve higher initial costs, but will save money in the long run by avoiding fines and maintaining compliance. Likewise, businesses should diversify their investments and maintain financial flexibility so that sudden policy changes do not cripple them. Another important aspect of the solution is engaging in policy analysis and consultation, where businesses use experts to interpret potential government actions and prepare contingency financial plans. This kind of foresight allows organizations to remain resilient, even in uncertain policy environments. An example of this can be seen in the case of the Indian Goods and Services Tax, a GST reform. Before GST was implemented, businesses had structured their financial strategies around the older tax systems, which involved multiple state and central taxes. When GST came into effect, it completely changed the way businesses handled their accounts, pricing, and supply chains. Companies that had anticipated the shift and prepared their financial systems in advance were able to adapt smoothly. They trained their staff, upgraded their accounting software, and adjusted their pricing strategies to remain competitive. On the other hand, businesses that ignored the upcoming policy changes found themselves struggling with compliance, facing penalties, and losing customers due to confusion over pricing. This example shows how awareness of government policy can directly shape financial decisions and determine whether a business thrives or falters during transitions. Another global example is the renewable energy sector. Governments across the world have introduced subsidies, tax benefits, and incentives for companies investing in solar, wind, and other green energy projects. Businesses that paid attention to these policy changes made financial decisions to allocate resources toward renewable projects, gaining not only tax advantages but also long-term profitability as demand for clean energy increased. Tesla, for instance, benefited heavily from U.S. government policies that promoted electric vehicles and clean energy. These incentives encouraged Tesla to continue making risky but visionary financial decisions, such as investing heavily in battery technology and charging infrastructure. The result was that Tesla not only survived but became a leader in an industry that traditional automakers were slow to adopt. Companies that ignored these policy trends and stuck to traditional fossil fuel investments found themselves at a disadvantage as governments and consumers alike shifted toward greener alternatives. For Class 12 students studying financial management, this principle is highly relevant because it underscores the importance of external forces on business decision-making. Government policies are not optional considerations, they are binding realities that shape costs, revenues, and profitability. Financial managers must therefore constantly monitor the legal environment and prepare adaptive strategies. A budget that looks perfect on paper can collapse under the weight of new regulations if businesses fail to plan ahead. By understanding this dynamic, students can appreciate that successful financial management requires not just internal efficiency, but also the ability to navigate and respond to government actions that influence the business environment. The problem that businesses frequently encounter is the constant change in consumer preferences, which makes financial decision making highly uncertain. A product that is popular today may suddenly lose its appeal tomorrow as new trends, technologies, or lifestyle changes emerge. Many companies make the mistake of assuming that consumer demand will remain stable and continue to invest money in production, marketing, or distribution of products that people no longer want. This results in wasted resources, unsold inventory, and declining profits. For example, a company may believe that its brand loyalty is enough to sustain sales, but when consumers shift toward a competitor offering something more innovative or sustainable, the financial consequences can be devastating. The problem here is that consumer behavior is not static. It is dynamic, influenced by culture, technology, fashion, and even global events. Ignoring this reality makes financial decisions risky and often leads to failure. The solution to this challenge is for businesses to consistently track and analyze consumer trends before finalizing major financial commitments. Rather than assuming demand, they need to invest in market research, surveys, data analytics, and feedback mechanisms to understand what customers actually want. By aligning financial decisions with consumer preferences, businesses can allocate their budgets more effectively. For instance, if research shows that customers are moving toward healthier lifestyles, a food company should shift its investments from sugary snacks toward healthier alternatives. Similarly, companies should build flexibility into their financial strategies so they can quickly adjust when consumer preferences change unexpectedly. This could mean keeping a portion of the budget uncommitted for innovation, or adopting just-in-time production models to avoid piling up unsold inventory. Essentially, the solution is about creating financial strategies that are consumer-driven, adaptable, and responsive to shifts in demand. A good example of this is Netflix. In its early years, Netflix started as a DVD rental service, which was highly popular at the time. But as consumer behavior shifted toward on-demand streaming, Netflix did not cling to its old model. Instead, it made the bold financial decision to invest heavily in streaming technology and digital rights. Later, when consumer preferences began shifting again toward exclusive and original content, Netflix adjusted by spending billions on producing original shows and movies. These financial decisions, based on careful observation of consumer behavior, allowed Netflix to remain at the forefront of the entertainment industry. On the other hand, companies like Blockbuster failed to adapt to changing consumer preferences. Blockbuster continued to invest in physical rental stores, believing customers would always prefer that model. As consumer behavior moved rapidly toward convenience and digital solutions, Blockbuster's financial decisions became outdated, and the company eventually went bankrupt. This contrast highlights how aligning financial choices with consumer behavior is the difference between survival and failure. Another example can be seen in the shift in the automobile industry toward electric vehicles. For decades, car manufacturers invested their finances primarily in improving gasoline-powered cars. However, as consumer preferences began changing toward environmentally friendly and cost-effective solutions, companies like Tesla took the lead by aligning their financial strategies with this demand. Tesla poured money into research, battery development, and charging infrastructure, even at the risk of short-term losses. Consumers rewarded this alignment by supporting the brand and driving its growth. Traditional companies like General Motors and Ford, which were initially slow to react, later had to reallocate massive financial resources to catch up with the electric vehicle trend. This shows how financial decisions based on consumer preferences not only ensure relevance, but also create opportunities for leadership in the market. For Class 12 students studying this concept, the lesson is that consumer preferences should be seen as a compass for financial management. Every pricing decision, investment choice, or production plan must take into account what customers currently value and what they are likely to value in the near future. Businesses that ignore consumers risk wasting resources and losing market share, while those that keep a close eye on preferences can adapt, innovate, and grow even in uncertain conditions. This principle explains why some companies rise rapidly in popularity while others fade into irrelevance despite having the same resources. The problem that businesses often run into is failing to recognize the impact of overall economic conditions on their financial decisions. Many organizations assume that their performance depends only on internal efficiency or industry-specific trends, but in reality, larger economic factors such as inflation, unemployment rates, interest rates, and GDP growth directly shape financial outcomes. For example, during times of economic boom, consumers tend to spend more, which encourages businesses to increase production, expand operations, or take on new investments. However, during recessions or economic slowdowns, the same strategies can quickly lead to overproduction, high debt, and losses because consumer spending power declines. The problem is that businesses that do not adjust their financial strategies to align with changing economic conditions often find themselves in crisis. They might borrow heavily during times of high interest rates or invest in risky projects when demand is falling, both of which create long-term financial instability. The solution is for businesses to integrate economic forecasting and analysis into their financial management process. Instead of making decisions based only on internal targets, managers need to evaluate external indicators like inflation trends, currency fluctuations, or government fiscal policies. By keeping track of these, businesses can time their financial decisions more strategically. For instance, if interest rates are low, borrowing money to expand production may make sense, but when rates are rising, businesses should reduce borrowing and focus on conserving cash. Similarly, if inflation is expected to rise, companies can make financial choices such as stocking raw materials in advance to avoid higher costs later. Another solution is diversification. By spreading investments across different markets and product lines, businesses reduce their dependence on one economic cycle and protect themselves against downturns. Essentially, the solution is about aligning financial management with the rhythm of the economy to ensure stability and growth. An example of this can be observed in the airline industry. Airlines are heavily influenced by economic conditions, particularly fuel prices and consumer demand for travel. When the global economy is strong, people travel more for business and leisure, and airlines benefit from increased ticket sales. In these periods, airlines may decide to invest in new aircraft, expand routes, and increase staff. However, when the economy weakens, travel demand falls sharply, and fuel costs can rise unpredictably, making these financial decisions unsustainable. During the 2008 financial crisis, many airlines that had expanded aggressively during the boom years found themselves burdened with high costs and low revenues, forcing them to cut routes, lay off staff, or even declare bankruptcy. On the other hand, airlines that had made cautious financial decisions by keeping reserves and limiting debt were better able to survive the downturn. This shows how directly financial decisions are tied to the broader economic environment. A more recent example can be seen in the retail industry during the COVID-19 pandemic. Economic conditions shifted dramatically as lockdowns reduced consumer spending, disrupted supply chains, and created uncertainty in global markets. Businesses that had assumed consistent demand and continued investing heavily in physical stores faced significant financial losses. Meanwhile, companies that recognized the shift in economic conditions and quickly adjusted their financial strategies by moving resources into online platforms, delivery systems, and digital marketing were able to not only survive but also thrive. Amazon, for instance, saw massive growth during this period because it aligned its financial decisions with the new economic reality of restricted mobility and increased reliance on e-commerce. Smaller retailers that ignored the signal struggled, even if they had strong products and loyal customers, because their financial strategies were not suited to the broader economic shift. For Class 12 students, the takeaway is that financial management cannot be practiced in isolation from the economic environment. Every choice, whether it is related to borrowing, pricing, investment, or expansion, must be evaluated in the light of larger economic conditions. A business may have excellent internal planning, but if it ignores the reality of inflation, interest rates, or consumer purchasing power, its financial strategies may collapse under external pressure. By understanding how economic trends influence decisions, students can appreciate that financial management is not just about allocating money, but about doing so in a way that aligns with the wider economic cycle. We started by understanding that business success isn't only about resources, but also about adapting to the environment. We saw how financial decisions are shaped by external factors like competition, government policies, consumer behavior, and economic conditions. From Nokia's fall to Tesla's rise, we learned that ignoring these forces can lead to failure, while aligning decisions with the environment can create long-term success. Competition pushes businesses to adjust pricing and innovation, while government regulations demand compliance-driven financial planning. Consumer preferences keep shifting, which forces businesses to stay flexible. And finally, the economic environment plays a critical role in guiding expansion, borrowing, and investment. For Class 12, the key lesson is that financial management is not just about internal accounting. It's about connecting strategy with real-world conditions. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to subscribe, and drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your take.